I'd like to touch upon women's rights and religious rights. So, when we talk about religious rights, the issue of exactly whose rights we are protecting is not really talked about. There's just some discussion of majority rights versus minority rights most of the time. And for example, Jewish rights inside a Muslim country or Muslim rights in a Hindu country. And in each case, men represent the interests of each religion. So what we find is that society is mainly concerned with men's religious rights. And this assumes that men and women have the same religious demands and needs. And yet we know that women actually do have their own religious beliefs and their own interpretations. And these are not necessarily the same as men's. So this creates a puzzle in which we really have to decide which human rights we're going to protect, those of the religious body or those of the women inside the religion. And then on top of this, there's the argument that the only way to protect women's rights is to be an atheist. But that would mean that women would have to choose between equality and their religion. And that would disregard the fact that 83% of the world's women are religious in some way. So do we just throw these women overboard? I don't think so. It's a false dichotomy. Women have religious rights and they may want to make a different religious interpretation. So we have to think about how to protect those rights. As a result of the male interpretation of religious rights, women's rights, religious rights are consistently being abused in all of the major religions. And we can see this most clearly in three areas, which I'll illustrate with examples from Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism. So, for example, in religious leadership, in discrimination of the female body, and in how this hurts women by being filtered through government policies. First, in terms of ordination, or how individuals become religious leaders who do ceremony and religious interpretation. This is done consistently by men in each religion. In Islam, we're talking about religious leaders who are by definition men, and only on a very rare occasion a woman can lead a prayer, and then only for other women. In Hinduism, similarly, in temples and prayers, they're led by Brahmin men, with very few exceptions, and women are even barred from entering the inner sanctum of the temples. And in Christianity, the leadership remains male, except in certain Protestant denominations. And in fact, the concept of apostolic succession blocks ordination of women, which apostolic succession says that Jesus chose male followers as his apostles, who then chose another set of male followers, and so on through history in a path that cannot be changed for eternity. And the fact of the matter is, it's not even written in the Bible. So now looking at the second abuse of religious rights, this is the discrimination of the female body and what I would call the weird obsession with menstruation. So what this is in Islam and Hinduism, there are rules restricting prayers and rituals to when women are not menstruating. And therefore, when in Islam, men have more violent things like female genital mutilation. In Hinduism, menstruating women between the age of 10 and 50 are banned from certain temples even. The Supreme Court of India 2 years ago overturned this ban. But then you had protests. Millions of men and some women even protested and blocked entry to the temple to these women. And then hundreds of thousands of women came out to protest and in favor of their religious rights. And then two women snuck into the temple and now they're hiding because of death threats. In Christianity, the right to choose whether abortion is in line with a woman's faith is not allowed, that interpretation. And access to contraceptives is also restricted. Even funding for contraception to women in poor countries is limited by this type of limited theology. So then lastly, the third area of abuse for women's religious rights is in how it is cemented through government policy. In Islam, what we see is that the Taliban in countries such as Saudi Arabia and Iran, women's religious interpretation is not allowed. But you have to remember, the Taliban's interpretation led them to close girls' schools, employment for women, and healthcare. But you see, if a woman decides that educating herself, working, or leaving her hair uncovered is in line with her religious beliefs, then these are her religious rights. In Christianity, US rape laws are influenced by the biblical concept that women are responsible for their own purity. In the Bible, also, when we're talking about marriage, authority for a girl's marriage lies with her father. And that's why in 25 states, minors of any age can be married with parental consent. And so you can see how statutory rape is legalized by religious norms that are interpreted by men. Prostitution laws are also subverted by moral codes that criminalize the women as sinners while providing lower penalties for the clients who are men. Then in Hinduism, we see the upper caste rape of lower caste or Dalit women, which is very common. And this is religiously sanctioned rape of lower caste women. Rapes of Dalit women are even not often investigated or prosecuted. So in conclusion, I just want to say the mainstream religious bodies see women's perspectives as peripheral to theological understanding. However, women's perspectives elevate theology to a higher level through respect for the spiritual needs of half of the world's population. Thank you.